Picture this. It's the year 1849 in a cramped, dimly lit studio in Edo, modern-day Tokyo. Katsushika Hokusai, the legendary Japanese painter behind The Great Wave, sits hunched over parchment, his brush trembling, not from age, but from effort. He's over 80 years old, with failing health and faded fame, yet he whispers to himself, "If heaven lets me live to 90, I'll become a real artist." That man had created over 30,000 works, and still, he didn't think he had arrived. Now pause. What if that mindset was the real secret? We keep looking for shortcuts, secret formulas, 5-minute hacks. But the truth? Mastery hides behind boring, persistent effort. It hides in that strange place where you stop caring how long it takes, because you care too much about doing it right. Modern psychology backs this. In a 2023 meta-study from Cambridge, researchers found that the #1 predictor of long-term performance wasn't IQ or talent. It was identity-fused obsession, the drive that turns a task into a calling. That same study linked long-term skill mastery to regions in the brain associated with emotional commitment, like the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Translation: when your goal means something to you, really means something, it sticks. We've been lied to in subtle ways. The idea that talent just shows up is a story designed to sell you on spectatorship, not participation. What if you stopped waiting for permission and started doing the work like Hokusai? Messy, slow, unrewarded, yet fiercely meaningful. Here's what we're doing in this video. You'll see that excellence isn't about being born with something magical. It's about wiring your brain through repetition, obsession, and strangely enough, love for the process. You'll learn why boredom is a fake signal, how habits shape neural maps, and why real growth feels like failure before it feels like triumph. So if you've ever thought, "I'm not a pro, so why even try?" This is your moment to flip that belief on its head. Because by the end of this, you'll realize greatness isn't a gift. It's a side effect of respect. Let's keep going. Respect is a verb, craft is character. If you truly respect a skill, you don't just admire the outcome. You show up when no one's watching. That's what makes mastery magnetic. Carol Dweck, in her work on the growth mindset, said, "Becoming is better than being." What she meant was this: people who treat every effort as a step forward, no matter how awkward or slow, end up winning. Why? Because their identity isn't built on looking talented. It's built on loving the process of improvement. Let's make that real. Picture someone trying to master public speaking. The amateur records one video, cringes at their voice, and quits. The craftsman records 20, hates all of them, but posts number 21. That's what David Bales and Ted Orland described in their book Art and Fear, an overlooked masterpiece. They write, "The best you can do is make art you care about, and lots of it. It's not about brilliance, it's about showing up." Neuroscience adds another layer. A 2022 fMRI study at the University of Zurich showed that the anterior cingulate cortex, key to emotional regulation and error detection, activates more in people who see their work as intrinsically valuable. That's not random. When your brain sees the task as meaningful, it rewards you. Dopamine rises not just from winning, but from honoring the effort itself. That's motivation architecture. Google has figured this out. There are internal DevOps teams that celebrate even minor bug fixes, not just major releases. Ship code with 40% fewer post-launch issues. Why? Because they built a culture where micromastery is respected, not rushed. Now here's the twist. When you start treating effort as sacred, something strange happens. You stop comparing. You stop asking, "Am I good yet?" and start asking, "Am I better than I was yesterday?" That shift rewires not just your habits, but your identity. From someone who dabbles to someone who crafts. Remember Hokusai? He didn't beg for recognition. He begged for time to keep improving. Because for him, respect wasn't an attitude, it was an action. So next time you pick up that brush, that mic, that code editor, that instrument, don't ask, "Will this be amazing?" Ask, "Will this be honest?" Mastery starts the moment you start treating the work like it deserves your full attention. Obsession with fundamentals. If you ask any world-class performer their secret, you'll usually hear the same answer. "I never stopped practicing the basics." That's not modesty, it's neurobiology. Tiger Woods, arguably the greatest golfer in history, still spends hours on 3-foot putts, even during championship weeks, because he knows what most people forget. Greatness lives in the smallest, most boring moves. Psychologist K. Anders Ericsson, whose life's work on deliberate practice reshaped how we think about talent, explained that experts don't just practice more, they practice smarter. They isolate their weaknesses, target them directly, and refine them obsessively. In his book Peak, he wrote, "The goal is not just to reach your potential, but to build it. Every drill is a blueprint for neural scaffolding." This isn't motivational fluff. It's measurable brain activity. The cerebellum, especially its Purkinje cells, thickens its synaptic density only when you correct errors in real time. That's right. Your brain literally grows more efficient when you stop, adjust, and repeat correctly. It's not repetition that changes your brain. It's correction. Feedback is fuel. George Leonard's book Mastery, a quiet classic from a martial artist's perspective, calls this the plateau paradox. You'll spend most of your life on flat terrain, seeing no obvious progress. But underneath, your nervous system is rewiring, your muscle memory is being coded, and then, without warning, you level up. Most people quit on the plateau. The masters build houses there. Think about a language learner. One person memorizes 1,000 flashy phrases with no structure. Another drills the same 20 verbs for a month. 6 months later, the second person is fluent. Why? Because fluency isn't flair. It's fundamentals on autopilot. And the truth is, we avoid the basics because they feel slow, unglamorous, and sometimes frustrating. But when you obsess over the fundamentals, you create a launch pad. You can improvise because your base is solid. You can innovate because your instincts are trained. Obsession with fundamentals is what turns potential into performance. It's what makes hard things look easy, and easy things feel like art. If you want to do anything exceptionally well, start here and never really leave. Fall in love with repetition, myelin, and memory. If there's one thing the brain rewards more than talent, it's repetition. But not just any repetition, the kind that's focused, intentional, and yes, sometimes painfully boring. That's the price of rewiring. Daniel Coyle, in The Talent Code, breaks this down with striking clarity. The more we fire a circuit, the more myelin optimizes it. Myelin is like neural insulation. It wraps around the pathways we use most, making them faster, cleaner, and more automatic. Think of it like turning a dirt trail into a 6-lane highway. That's why elite violinists in the famous Berlin study clocked nearly 10 times more feedback-rich solo practice hours than their average peers. Not fancier hours, not hours full of praise or ease, just more quality reps. The kind that hurt a little, that made them stretch. The kind that locked in precision through consistent effort. It's backed by science. MRI scans from the Max Planck Institute showed that the more a skill was practiced under self-correcting feedback, the denser and more efficient the white matter became in motor and decision-making regions of the brain. That's why repetition works, not because it's magical, but because it makes performance inevitable. Peter C. Brown, in Make It Stick, adds another layer. Learning is deeper and more durable when it's effortful. He explains that difficulty is not a bug, it's a feature. Struggling to recall, to solve, or to adjust under pressure activates stronger long-term memory encoding. That's why passive review, just watching or rereading, barely moves the needle. Your brain wants to work, it just doesn't want to waste time. Here's something most people miss. Boredom is a mirage. It's not a sign that what you're doing is unimportant. It's your brain's sneaky way of asking, can we take a break from this discomfort? But if you push through, that discomfort turns into fluency. Repetition becomes rhythm. Rhythm becomes mastery. Muscle memory isn't just for athletes. It's how writers get fluent with storytelling, how programmers instinctively debug code, how speakers find the perfect pause. It's how anything hard becomes second nature through consistent, meaningful, mistake-filled repetition. Fall in love with that process. Treat it like a relationship. Respect it when it feels dull, and commit even harder when no one's watching. Because when you do, your brain wraps those circuits in neural armor, and before long, what once felt like effort becomes instinct. Embrace desirable difficulty. What if the things that make you struggle are exactly what make you smarter? That's not just poetic, it's neurological. Anders Ericsson's legendary research on deliberate practice shows that people who flirt with failure on purpose, who push themselves just past their current limits, grow faster, learn deeper, and retain longer. He didn't say, get it right fast. He said, get better at getting it wrong right. It sounds counterintuitive, but psychologists call this desirable difficulty. It's the kind of challenge that feels uncomfortable, but forces adaptation. A great example comes from Matthew Syed's lesser-known book, Bounce. He describes how Olympic table tennis players trained under dimmed lights, on purpose, forcing their brains to develop sharper anticipatory skills. When they returned to normal lighting, they were faster than ever. They trained under strain to dominate under ease. In cognitive psychology labs, this effect shows up repeatedly. Researchers found that when learning is slightly harder, when you space practice over days, when you mix up problem types, interleaving, or when you test yourself before you feel ready, retention skyrockets. A 2020 meta-analysis from the Journal of Applied Cognitive Psychology found that interleaved practice increased memory retention by up to 60% compared to blocked practice. That's not marginal, that's massive. Your brain isn't designed to remember easy wins. It's designed to remember survival, so when you fumble, guess, or stretch, the hippocampus works harder. The amygdala tags the event with emotion, and the memory sticks. Discomfort triggers the system to encode deeply. There's a parallel here with ancient Stoic thinking. Epictetus, born a slave and later a philosopher, wrote, "Difficulties are things that show a person what they are." He believed struggle wasn't punishment. It was proof of progress. Modern neuroscience agrees. Microfailures, when emotionally tolerated and cognitively processed, strengthen the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the part that balances decision-making and emotion regulation. So the next time you mess up in practice, fumble during rehearsal, or struggle to understand something new, don't run from it. Lean into it. That's not the signal to stop. That's the sign your brain is learning in real time. And when you combine difficulty with structure, you build something even more powerful. Let's now explore how chunking, not cramming, is the secret to mastering complexity. Think in chunks, not chains. Let's say you're trying to remember a 12-digit phone number. One way is to memorize it digit by digit, painfully, one after the other. But your brain doesn't like that. Instead, you probably break it into groups, maybe 3 sets of 4 digits. That's called chunking, and it's one of the most powerful tools for mastering complex skills. In the 1950s, cognitive psychologist George Miller coined the phrase, the magical number 7 plus or minus 2. It means our working memory, the mental scratch pad where we hold information temporarily, can juggle about 7 pieces of data before it overloads. But here's the trick. If you organize that data into meaningful chunks, your memory stretches. That's why chess grandmasters don't memorize pieces. They memorize board states. That's why musicians don't read individual notes. They read phrases. Daniel Willingham, a leading voice in educational psychology, calls this knowledge compression. His research shows that as we grow in skill, our brain compresses scattered tasks into mental macros, like clicking 1 button instead of 10. That's why experts appear fast and fluid. Their brains aren't faster, they're better organized. Want to know who else used chunking like a superpower? Fighter pilots. Before every mission, they run through checklists that chunk critical sequences into tiny trainable units. It reduces error, boosts confidence, and keeps the cognitive load manageable during chaos. The same applies whether you're giving a speech, writing code, or learning guitar. Break it down, train the parts, recombine later. In neuroscience, chunking works by transferring tasks from the prefrontal cortex, which handles conscious effort, to the basal ganglia, where habits live. The more you chunk and rehearse, the more your brain offloads effort into automatic circuits. That's how skill moves from conscious to instinctive. There's also a study from Carnegie Mellon that found learners who organized study material into hierarchies retained 50% more over time than those who didn't. Not by studying longer, but by thinking smarter. So next time you feel overwhelmed by a task, don't ask, how can I memorize this? Ask, how can I chunk this? Whether it's a dance routine, a pitch deck, or a foreign language, break it into bite-sized patterns. Stack them like Lego. Before you know it, you'll be building skyscrapers on autopilot. Now that you know how to chunk complexity, let's explore how to enter the zone where time disappears, where skill and challenge collide. Welcome to the flow state. Surf the flow channel. Have you ever lost track of time while working on something? Not scrolling your phone, but building, creating, performing, fully locked in. That wasn't random. You were in a flow state, and flow isn't mystical. It's measurable. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who coined the term, found that flow happens when your skills and the challenge in front of you are perfectly matched. Not too easy, not too hard, just enough to stretch you. In flow, your brain enters what neuroscientists call transient hypofrontality, a fancy way of saying the noisy part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, goes quiet. That's the part that second guesses, worries, overthinks, and when it shuts down temporarily, something magical happens. Your inner critic disappears. You're free to perform without self-sabotage. Books like Stealing Fire reveal that Navy SEALs use breathwork protocols, like the 478 technique, to drop into flow states before high-stakes missions. In these moments, brain scans show a spike in norepinephrine and dopamine, neurotransmitters that sharpen focus and increase motivation. You're not just in the zone. Your chemistry has shifted. This isn't reserved for elite soldiers or Silicon Valley CEOs. You can engineer it. The key? Raise your challenge slightly above your current ability. If the task is too easy, you'll get bored, too hard, and you'll panic. But just right, and your mind clicks in. Stanford's Flow Research Collective found that flow-prone individuals had 3 habits in common: clear goals, immediate feedback, and deep concentration. So whether you're writing, designing, coding, or practicing an instrument, carve out space. Turn off distractions. Set a small, clear goal. Give yourself real-time feedback. And breathe. Here's something most people miss. Flow isn't about ease. It's about tension, the right kind, like surfing a wave that could wipe you out, but you stay upright. It's thrilling because it demands everything, and that's what makes it unforgettable. Think of Marcus Aurelius writing his meditations during war, finding clarity amid chaos. That's flow. Think of a jazz pianist mid-improv, eyes closed, fingers flying. That's flow. And the more you train for it, the more your brain starts craving that state over distraction. Flow isn't a reward, it's a consequence of preparation, focus, and challenge. And once you learn to surf it, you'll never want to go back. But what happens when you want to influence others, not just yourself? Let's talk about persuasion and the ethical psychology of influence. Ethical dark psychology and persuasion. Let's be honest, being good at something isn't enough. If no one sees it, feels it, or cares, it disappears into the void. That's where persuasion steps in, not as manipulation, but as transmission. Influence is how skill becomes impact. And when it's ethical, it amplifies your talent without corrupting it. Robert Cialdini, the godfather of influence science, reminds us, people are more likely to say yes to those they perceive as similar. That's not about fakery, it's about resonance. Mirroring, storytelling, and shared values all create trust loops. And trust is the bridge between competence and credibility. Now, persuasion gets dangerous when it becomes coercive. That's the realm of dark psychology, where tactics like gaslighting, emotional baiting, and false urgency are used to control. And they work, but only short-term. Neuroscience shows that the medial prefrontal cortex, responsible for empathy and moral judgment, actually shows reduced activity in people who regularly manipulate others. The brain adapts to manipulation by making it feel normal. That's not power, that's erosion. Ethical persuasion, on the other hand, lights up different areas. A 2021 Princeton study found that narrative transportation, the ability to emotionally absorb people into a story, builds connection and memory better than raw facts. This is where storytelling becomes your superpower. One brilliant but lesser-known book on this is The Uses of Enchantment by Bruno Bettelheim. He analyzed fairy tales not as childish fantasy, but as coded psychological tools. Each story embedded emotional lessons, archetypes, and persuasion patterns that shape the developing psyche. Think about that. Influence through meaning, not manipulation. Want to persuade ethically? Focus on value. Show, don't just say. Use testimonials, case studies, or analogies that paint emotional pictures. And be honest about limitations. It builds credibility faster than hype ever could. Think about Mr. Beast. He doesn't just give money away. He creates narratives of generosity, loyalty, and community. His persuasion works because it's not just performance, it's alignment. The story and the actions match. That's the formula. So yes, learn the tactics, understand mirroring, social proof, and cognitive bias triggers, but wield them with integrity, because influence without trust is empty, and skill without influence is invisible. Engineer your environment. You can have the strongest willpower in the world, but if your environment is constantly nudging you in the wrong direction, you'll burn out fast. That's not weakness, it's design failure. Psychologist Kurt Lewin put it simply: behavior is a function of the person and their environment. Change the environment and behavior follows. This is why productivity isn't just about mindset, it's about landscape. James Clear, in Atomic Habits, said, "You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." Want to master a skill? Then engineer the surroundings that make it effortless to show up and hard to skip. Let's break that down. When Google redesigned their offices, they noticed that putting healthy snacks at eye level led to a 30% increase in healthy food choices. That wasn't motivation, it was visual cue control. At home, the same logic applies. Want to practice guitar? Don't stash it in the closet, hang it on the wall. Want to write more? Block websites, silence your phone, and use a one-tab browser window. One screen, one task. The science is undeniable. A study from the University of British Columbia found that reducing visual clutter in workspaces improved focus and task completion by up to 45%. Why? Because your prefrontal cortex, already doing the heavy lifting of learning, doesn't have to waste bandwidth filtering distractions. And social design matters too. Pixar, for example, created a ritual called the Brain Trust, a meeting where anyone can critique story ideas, regardless of status. That single change flattened hierarchy and turned feedback into fuel instead of fear. What happened? They made hit after hit. Skill plus supportive environment equals acceleration. Even your digital ecosystem counts. Are your YouTube recommendations filled with noise or insight? Are your social feeds feeding your goals or draining your focus? Curate your inputs as fiercely as your outputs. Environment design is the silent lever of mastery. You don't have to fight for motivation every day if the room you walk into is built to support your craft. Small changes, like a calendar on the fridge, a sticky note on your laptop, or a ritual playlist, compound over time into a powerful support system. So ask yourself, is your environment sabotaging you or scaffolding your success? Because once you shape the space around you, the space within you starts to shift too. Stay plastic for life. They used to tell us that once your brain matures, it's game over for growth. That's outdated. Neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to rewire itself, isn't just real, it's lifelong. And the implications for skill mastery are massive. Norman Doidge, in his groundbreaking book, The Brain That Changes Itself, explained that the brain is less like a machine and more like a muscle. Use it, challenge it, and it physically reshapes. Let's make it practical. In 2024, the Stanford Movement Lab tracked a 71-year-old woman who took up ballet to rehab a knee injury. 6 months later, fMRI scans revealed new motor cortex activity and a 20% gain in balance and coordination. She didn't just recover, she rewired. That's not a miracle. That's motion meeting intention. David Epstein, in Range, makes a powerful case that generalists, people who cross domains, develop broader and more flexible neural maps than narrow specialists. When you expose your brain to new fields, it's forced to build fresh synaptic links. That's why learning a musical instrument can improve math reasoning, or why dancing sharpens spatial memory. It's cross-training for the mind. Even small switches matter. A study published in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience showed that adults who learned basic juggling showed increased gray matter in visual and motor regions. Not after years, after just 3 weeks of practice. The brain isn't stubborn, it's responsive. And here's the kicker: novelty is fuel. When you try something new, your brain floods with dopamine, not as a reward, but as an attention anchor. It tells your system, pay attention. This might be important. That's why trying new skills, languages, sports, arts, keeps your mind young and your focus sharp. Carl Jung once said, "We cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of its morning." That includes how we train. What got you here won't get you there. To stay plastic, you must stay playful. Switch up routines. Explore opposite fields. Don't just double down, diversify. If your skill feels stale, don't quit. pivot, cross-train your brain. Even legends like Leonardo da Vinci didn't specialize early. They wandered, collected patterns, then fused them into genius. So whether you're 17 or 70, remember this. It's not too late. It's never too late. As long as you breathe, your brain can bend. And when it bends, it builds. Grit, trauma, and transcendence. What drives someone to keep going when the applause stops, when progress stalls, when everything hurts? It's not motivation. It's not even discipline. It's grit. What Angela Duckworth calls passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. But here's the deeper truth. Grit is often born from pain. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. He lost his family, endured the unthinkable, yet emerged with a vision. Suffering without meaning breaks us, but suffering with meaning can transform us. Modern trauma research echoes this. Controlled exposure to pain, paired with purpose, reshapes the brain. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, linked to emotional regulation and self-awareness, thickens when individuals process trauma through narrative, connection, and action. That's not just healing, that's adaptation. Stephen Hayes, in his underappreciated book, The Happiness Trap, flips the script on suffering. He teaches acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, where the goal isn't to eliminate pain, but to use it. You don't need to feel good to do good, he writes. That single idea has helped thousands recover from depression, addiction, and burnout, not by fighting their emotions, but by embracing them and moving anyway. Grit isn't clean, it's messy. It's waking up with anxiety and showing up anyway. It's being overlooked, underestimated, or rejected, and doing the work anyway. It's not glamour, it's guts. And often, trauma plants the seed. Studies from the University of North Carolina on post-traumatic growth show that many people emerge from crisis with stronger relationships, deeper values, and new clarity of purpose. The pain didn't disappear, it evolved. Marcus Aurelius said, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Grit is that process in motion, turning obstacles into engines. This is why skill mastery isn't just cognitive, it's emotional. It requires you to sit with your discomfort, your self-doubt, your fear, and still take one more swing, write one more sentence, shoot one more shot. Because in the end, those who master anything aren't the ones who never suffered. They're the ones who learned how to suffer well. Connecting the dots. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need a golden childhood, a perfect brain, or elite connections. You need one thing, the willingness to stay in the chair, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when no one's clapping. Respect the craft. Like Hokusai muttering through his final brushstrokes, believing he still wasn't a real artist. You honor your skill by showing up, not with ego, but with intention. Then marry that respect with fundamentals. Drill the basics until they're not just what you do, but who you are. Fall in love with repetition. Wrap your neural pathways in myelin by doing the boring stuff beautifully, because every time you repeat with care, your brain is learning that excellence isn't an accident. It's architecture. Seek difficulty. Don't chase ease. Choose friction. Micro-failure isn't shameful, it's your teacher. The more it stings, the more it sticks. Then break complexity into chunks. Structure your learning like a map, not a maze. Small wins build fast. Enter the flow state as often as you can. Quiet the inner critic. Chase that sweet spot between challenge and skill, and let your brain do what it was designed to do. Lose itself in meaningful motion. Add persuasion to the mix, but use it ethically. Learn to mirror with care, tell stories with soul, and communicate like someone who values trust more than applause. And while you're building yourself, build your environment too. Prime your space to support the work. One screen, one tool, one ritual. Because friction in your space means friction in your brain. Stay plastic, stay playful, train your mind like a child and your body like a craftsman. If something stops working, try something new. You are not fixed. You are clay that hardens through fire and movement. Hold your scars. Don't hide them. Pain becomes propulsion when you add meaning. Let the world say, you're obsessed. Because maybe obsession is just another word for devotion. Now shut this video, not because you're done, but because you're ready. Pick one micro move, just one. A scale on the piano, a sentence on the page, a line of code, a breath, a step, and repeat it. Then do it again, not because anyone is watching, but because you are. And when you do it long enough, the ordinary will stop looking ordinary. It'll start looking like mastery. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll wake up not trying to be a pro. You'll just be someone who does the work like it matters. Because it does.